We want to pick up where we left off. The place where we are now is that we understand that for a breach of contract in any bar problem, you look for three remedies: damages, restitution, specific performance. Look for them by using this structure within each of these categories of damages. If our categories of remedies, one remedy is damages, one remedy is restitution, one remedy is specific performance. In the case of tort law, where there has been a tort, what remedies can you get for that? Damages, restitution, injunction. Now, the problems, one of the class of problems that appears here in the case of constructive trust, we talked about what a constructive trust is, what an equitable lien is, but this is one of the places where bar examiners can go further out here on this branch. And what they do is they will create a situation where I own a car, and you embezzled me and took my car. You acquired my car as a result of embezzlement. Then you traded the car for an airplane, and you sold the airplane and put the money in a U.S. savings bond, or put the money in an account someplace in your name. And now I find out about all this, and I want to get the money back. And the question becomes, can I trace my money through all of those transactions? And the answer is yes. I can trace my money through those transactions, and so if you you acquired the car from me, you used the car to buy an airplane, I could claim ownership of the airplane. And what I would do is I would trace my assets into the airplane, and then ask the court to impose a constructive trust on the airplane that you acquired with my property. If you sold the airplane and acquired whatever I said you got next, got some stock for the airplane, you sold the airplane and got stock for it, then again, I can ask the court to impose a constructive trust or equitable lien. If you got the title to the stock, I can choose a constructive trust or equitable lien. If the stock increased in value, I'm going to want a constructive trust. If the stock decreased in value, I'm going to use an equitable lien. So as long as I can show that you acquired this next asset with my property, then I can trace into it, and I can get the court to impose a constructive trust and get that very property from you. And when I get that property from you, that accounts for that part, not how much the property is worth, but the amount of my money that went into the property, that's how much is accounted for. Could be maybe with you only using $10,000 of my money, you bought Blackacre and it's now worth $50,000. Well, even though I get Blackacre by using a constructive trust, it only accounts for the $10,000 of my money that was traced into it. The fact that I made a profit off Blackacre doesn't matter. We're not going to let you keep the profit if you're the crook. And so, in this area that I'm referring to now, here under the constructive trust, that the bar examiners will often require you to trace the property through several steps and show that you can still use a constructive trust when you finally trace the assets into that property. Now, a couple of other things that happen along the way. One of them is that sometimes you have property, you have an account that has mixed money in it. That is to say, I embezzled $10,000 from you, and now or $50,000 from you. I embezzled $50,000 from you, and I put this money into a bank account. And that bank account has the money that I embezzled from you in it, but it also has some of my own money in that very same bank account. Okay? So both of our monies are in this bank account. Now I start spending money out of that bank account. And the problem becomes whose money was spent. How do you decide whose money was spent? And there's some rules about it, and we have a problem dealing with that, but I just want to point out the general nature of these problems so we'll know what we're looking for here. So we understand that for a tort, you may get damages. We understand that damages must be actual, causal, foreseeable, unavoidable. We understand that this foreseeable means proximately caused, that once you get beyond the point where the harm is no longer proximately caused, you don't have to pay anymore. Punitive damages, be sure to mention those if it's an intentional tort, and point out that if the intentional tort is committed with malice, you may be entitled to punitive damages. These are all restitutionary devices here. You know how they work, and the injunction. Now, with those concepts in mind, and once again, I want to emphasize something that's important, and we want to turn to a problem, and that is, over here in contract law, when we say damages must be actual, causal, foreseeable, and unavoidable, that this foreseeable in contract law, which I will circle in red, this foreseeable in contract law, right here, is not the same over here as this foreseeable in tort law. We'll use the word foreseeable in both cases, but in the case of contract law, the damages must be really honest to goodness foresight in advance foreseeable in order to collect them. And that's what the rule of Hadley versus Baxendale tells us. So in contract law, foreseeable really means in advance. Over here in tort law, foreseeable does not mean in advance. It's really, Foster says, this should have been called hindseeable. Because what you do is you trace the damage out to the point where the public policy says, forget it, you don't have to pay beyond that. Okay? And that's where your liability ends. And everything up to that point is called foreseeable, and everything after that point is said unforeseeable. Okay, and that's what it means in this case. It's not foresight, it's how far out the chain are you going to make them pay. And the part where you, as far out as you'll make them pay, that's foreseeable. Now, with all of this in mind, let's take a look at how to use some of this stuff to do some problems. The first problem I'd like to do is July 78, the problem with Expo and Rock, Magnus and those people. The July 78 problem. In the July 78 problem, it reads as follows. This is Remedies question from the July 78 bar that we're going to do now. It reads as follows. Expo, a promoter of musical performances, contracted with Rock, a little-known music group, to play a concert at College Center for a fee of $5,000. Okay, pay attention to what we have here. Little-known rock group contracted to play at the college for $5,000. And the contract is between Expo and Rock. Next sentence. Subsequently, Rock released a record which was a commercial success and has resulted in a high demand for the group. Aha! Rock has suddenly become very popular. Of course, that means they can get a lot more than $5,000 for their performance now. So you see what's about to happen. Continuing. Rock thereafter indicated to Expo that it would abide by the contract and advance sales have been heavy. So Rock told Expo, we're not going to cut out on you just because we're famous now. So they said, we will abide by the contract. Now that can be important because if Expo knows that rock has suddenly become very, very popular. And Expo then should realize that rock isn't going to come back here and perform for $5,000. They're going to breach the contract. And so to keep you from going that route where you would say Expo should have known rock wasn't coming back, they told you that rock indicated to Expo that it would come back. Okay. And the sales have been heavy. Now, notice, sales have been heavy. The sales would have been ordinary if these people had not become famous. Well, they're famous, and now the sales are heavy, because after all, it told us it was a little-known music group. And so the sales would have been ordinary. But the sales have been heavy because they suddenly become famous. Now, this means, of course, that if rock does breach, that the damages are going to be larger because the loss will be larger. But be careful, because this is a breach of contract. If rock does not play, that's a breach of contract. And the only damages that Expo will be able to get from rock are the damages which were foreseeable when the contract was formed. Now, when the contract was formed, this was a little-known music group. And so when Expo sues rock for not showing up, the damages that Expo is entitled to were the damages or the profits that he expected to make, and any other expenses that he's incurred. Not the damages, not the profits that Expo would actually make, because those were not that was not foreseeable. And when the contract was formed, in other words, Expo, if rock doesn't show up, Expo is going to lose a lot more money than they thought, because the ticket sales have been so heavy. So Expo, instead of losing a lot more money, let's say it's the other way around. Expo stood to benefit enormously from the popularity of the band. And now Expo isn't going to get that if rock breaches. So Expo is going to say, I want that from rock, the money I didn't make from all these additional sales. And the answer is that was not foreseeable when the contract was formed. So Expo will be able to get the profits that he expected to make when the contract was formed, but not the profits that he actually, the larger amounts that he would have made if it had been formed. Now that's what happens when Expo sues rock. The Expo and rock have a contractual relationship. So the only thing Expo can sue rock for is breach of contract. There's no tort there, and there's no punitive damages. All you get is your expectancy. Okay, let's continue. 2 weeks before the scheduled concert, rock notified Expo by letter that it would not perform the scheduled concert. In explanation, it enclosed a copy of a letter from Magnus urging rock to breach its contract with Expo and to perform for Magnus on the scheduled date in a nearby city for $50,000. And Magnus is now advertising this in the nearby city. So Expo is a victim here. It's a victim of breach of contract by rock. But you also have inducing breach of contract by Magnus. Now, when you do this, don't forget to pull out the elements for inducing breach of contract. There's only 2 elements for inducing breach. They are the person must know about the contract and intend to induce the breach, and you've got enough evidence to prove that. So induces. So when Expo can sue Magnus for the tort of inducing breach. So Expo has 2 possible lawsuits. Expo can sue rock for breach of contract. Expo can sue Magnus for inducing breach of contract. Now, inducing breach of contract is a tort. And when Expo sues Magnus for the tort of inducing breach of contract, Expo can get from Magnus all the harm out that is proximately caused, all the way out the chain of injury until you get to the point where it wasn't foreseeable anymore. The public policy says ended there. And so in this case, I think that when Expo sues Magnus for the tort of inducing breach, Expo can say, you know, the profits that I lost because the profits that I lost because Rock isn't playing, all those people who were buying this lots and lots of tickets from me, all that money I would have made if Rock had played, I can get that money from Magnus because that loss was proximately caused by the tort. So you see, I can get more in a tort claim usually than a contract claim, because the contract claim, only damages I can get are the ones that were actually truly foreseeable and ahead of time. And whereas in tort law, we call it foreseeable, but we mean all of the harm that is connected enough to the wrongdoing that the public policy says the wrongdoer must pay. In this case, Magnus would have to pay all those losses that Expo incurred. All the extra money that Expo would have made if Rock had played there, that's all quite foreseeable, and the public, they make them pay for it. So Expo will do better suing Magnus than he will suing Rock. Also, when Expo sues Magnus for the tort of inducing breach, Expo might get punitive damages. If this is an intentional tort, and he can claim, maliciousness. So when Expo sues Magnus, he will get all the harm that was caused by Magnus. He will get punitive damages from Magnus. And finally, when Expo sues Magnus, Magnus made a profit. If Rock actually plays for Magnus, Magnus is going to make a net profit of $75,000. So if Rock plays for Magnus, Magnus is going to make $75,000. Now, Magnus made this $75,000 profit by committing an intentional tort. And if you commit an intentional tort to make the money, the public policy says, we're not going to let you keep it. So we don't want Magnus to keep that $75,000. What are you going to do with it? Expo sues him for it under the doctrine of, right here, equitable restitution. Expo isn't getting real restitution because Expo never owned the $75,000. So as to the $75,000, Expo never really owned it. So it's not real restitution, but it's what we call equitable restitution, just to keep Magnus from keeping it. It's also called quasi-contract. Also, please notice that if you can locate this $75,000 in some particular bank account someplace, you can ask the court to impose a constructive trust on it and declare that Magnus is holding that $75,000 for Expo, and ask the court to tell them to give it to Expo within 30 days. So when Expo sues Magnus, they can try to get the $75,000 under equitable restitution. They can try to get the $75,000 based on constructive trust. And this is in addition to the harm that Expo suffered, and in addition to the punitive damages that you impose on Magnus. Okay? Once again, just to be sure it's clear, Expo's got two people that Expo can sue. If Expo sues Rock, Expo is limited to a breach of contract suit, because that's all Rock did with them. When they sue for breach of contract, Expo is going to get the damages which were foreseeable at the time the contract was formed. And at that time, Rock wasn't even famous. So Expo is not going to get that much. Expo can also sue Magnus. Only when Expo sues Magnus, we sue Magnus on a tort theory, because Magnus induced breach of contract. What you must do in your answer is establish the tort by using the elements. Don't just talk about it. Put the elements down there and go element by element. That's everything you do in a bar. They want to see a rule. They want to see you work the rule. They don't want to see a general discussion about it. When you write general discussions and kind of hope you've incorporated the rule in that general discussion someplace, that's how you get 60s and maybe 65s if you're lucky. Okay? But you lay out the rule and then work the elements of the rule. That's how you get the 75s and 80s. Okay? So an element-driven analysis. So Expo can sue Magnus. They can sue Magnus for inducing breach, pull out the elements, show what happened. And then what are the remedies for inducing breach? Remedies for inducing breach of contract are the compensatory damages, all the harm that Expo suffered, including the losses of all those extra people who came because Rock was now famous. You get all that stuff. So Expo will get compensatory damages from Rock, maybe get punitive damages from Rock, and get some equitable restitution from Rock. And you can even discuss constructive trust as a way to get a hold of this $75,000. Now, continuing our reading, third paragraph. Expo cannot now obtain another act which can successfully compete for an audience with the city concert. So now, when Expo sues, if Expo sues Rock or if Expo sues Magnus, Expo has to mitigate damages. And what they're telling you here is that there's nothing Expo can do. So bring that in under your mitigation of damages. Don't just talk about it. Do it this way. Expo is also faced with the necessity of refunding money received from advanced ticket sales. Well, if Expo has to give the money back from advanced ticket sales, that's not really a damage. Okay, giving the money back, I mean, he lost the profit, but he's got to give the money back. But the real problem here is that it costs money to return that money. Administrative fees, he's got to hire people to do the bookkeeping and stuff in order to do that. That's an incidental damage. So when Expo sues Rock for breach of contract, Expo should be able to get the damages, get the benefit of the bargain as he expected it when the contract was formed. The incidental damages, which are the administrative fees of returning that money. Reliance damages, I think they tell us here in the next paragraph that Expo has spent $3,500 for reliance damages. Get that back, and there is no liquidated damages here. So again, when Expo sues Rock, go right down the list here. Next, when Expo sues Magnus, establish the tort, and then go right down the list. One thing I need to caution you about is a general principle in these remedies questions, that whenever you have a remedies question, that the strategy for answering a remedies question is as follows. Establish the wrong. First. Now the wrong might be a breach of contract, the wrong might be a tort, the wrong might be violating somebody's constitutional rights, the wrong might be a breach of a fiduciary duty that an officer of a corporation owes to the corporation. Whatever the wrong may be, establish the wrong first. And once you've established what, and you do that by the elements, don't just kind of talk about it. Use the elements. Once you've established the wrong, then you want to know what remedies are available. Then you speak to Remedies. And you know that if the wrong is a tort, that there are 3 remedies you should look for: damages, restitution, injunction. If the wrong is a breach of contract, there are 3 remedies you should look for: damages, restitution, specific performance. So be sure to do them that way. In this problem, that I think this pretty much finishes the problem, they do mention that Expo says that if Expo wants the court to make Rock come and play, says I'm going to lose a lot of goodwill and you can't place money value, I might go out of business. So Expo wants the court to make Rock come to town and play. You and I know the court's not going to do that, but we need to go through our elements. Okay? Can Expo get that injunction? The answer is surely no. The TRO, there's nothing to maintain. You just have to go directly for the injunction. This whole thing's going to happen right away. So you go for the injunction, and at the injunction you're saying the remedy law is inadequate. You're representing Expo now. Expo says, I want the injunction because the remedy law is inadequate. Why is the remedy law inadequate? Because it's money. I don't want money because I'm going to lose goodwill and things of that sort that I can't place a value on. So the remedy law is inadequate. Use the facts to show that. Next, property right. Well, Expo is saying it's my contract rights, property right, although I don't really need it. Next, feasible to enforce. This is where it breaks down. You're going to have trouble establishing that the court is not feasible for the court to tell a rock band to go play. So it's not feasible to enforce that, and that's where you would lose it. Balancing the equities. This fair, they've already bargained, so that's... Well, when you balance the equities, one of the things you consider is that if rock band plays in the city, rock band is going to get $50,000. And so for the court to say to rock band, no, don't go make the 50,000. You come and play here for 5,000. Well, that's going to work a real hardship on Rock. Not only that, from Expo's point of view, if Rock plays in city and Expo makes $75,000, pardon me, Magnus makes $75,000 when Rock plays for Magnus in the big city, well, Expo can go get that $75,000. The way we talked about it here at the board. So Expo is better off also. So everybody's better off if you let Rock go there and play. You might mention that under balancing the equities. D, defenses, 13th Amendment, telling a rock band to go play might be violating the rule against involuntary servitude. And that's about it. Let's do one more problem. Let's do the problem with from the February 2000 bar. We're on page 5 probably. Pat Kimco is the problem. Now, this problem, the problem with Pat Kimco, has a heavy nuisance component to it. And so it would be very helpful for me to tell you how to do a nuisance problem first, and then let's go through and do it. Let me tell you how you do a nuisance problem. The first thing you got to understand about nuisance is that nuisance is not a cause of action. You know, a lot of people seem to use the term as though nuisance is a cause of action, like negligence is a cause of action. But nuisance is not. Nuisance is a type of damage. Okay? It's a type of damage, and the type of damage that constitutes nuisance is the unreasonable and substantial non-trespass. Let me say it, start over. A nuisance is, here's the rule, here's the rule. Nuisance is a non-trespassing and substantial and, in some states, unreasonable interference with the quiet use and enjoyment of the land of another. Again, nuisance is the non-trespassory and substantial and, in some jurisdictions, unreasonable interference with the use of the land of another. So if I am using my land and the people down the street have a factory, and they blow the factory whistle every night at midnight when they change shifts, and it's so loud it wakes me up, and they blow it 2 or 3 times at midnight. And so that is interfering with the use and enjoyment of my property. It is non-trespassory. It's not a trespass. If someone threw a rock on my property, that's a trespass. But this is not a trespassory, it's a non-trespassory. So the loud noises, sounds, the bad smells, that sort of stuff. So it's a non-trespassory interference with the use and enjoyment of my land, and that whistle does that. And now, so it's non-trespassory. I'll claim that the harm is substantial. The interference with the use of my land is substantial. In some jurisdictions, I'll try to prove it's unreasonable. Others, I don't have to do that. And now, so what I have proven when I prove that the use of my land has been interfered with in a way that is substantial and maybe unreasonable. When I have proven that, what I have proven is that I have suffered a nuisance. I have suffered a nuisance because somebody has interfered with the quiet use and enjoyment of my land. Not by a little bit, they interfered with it substantially, and in some jurisdictions unreasonable. And so when I prove that, I have proven that I have suffered a nuisance. It's no different than my fender in my car has been dented. That's a type of damage. Now, once I know that my fender has been dented, or once I know I have suffered a type of nuisance, the next thing I want to do, if I want to recover for whoever dented my fender or whoever committed the nuisance, what I do is I find out who caused the harm. And I say, okay, I find out who hit my fender or who committed the nuisance, who caused the nuisance. Now that I know who did it, that person who did it must have been acting either intentionally, negligently, or engaged in an abnormally dangerous activity. Once again, the person who hit my fender, if I want to collect for the fender, I got to prove that the person who hit my fender either hit my fender intentionally, or they hit my fender negligently, or they hit my fender while engaged in some ultra-hazardous activity. So except for statutory wrongs, those are the only kind of wrongs they are. So when I find this person who hit my fender, that's what I have to prove in order to collect from them. That they did it intentionally, negligently, or strict liability. Likewise, when people have committed a nuisance on my property, and I'm the victim of a nuisance, because I proved the things I mentioned earlier. When I'm the victim of a nuisance, then if I want to recover, what do I have to do? I have to find the person who committed the nuisance. In my hypothetical, it was a factory down the street. And then I need to establish that these people did it, they caused that damage to me intentionally, or they did it negligently, or they're engaged in an ultra-hazardous activity, and it happened to me. So if I want to collect those, I've got to prove one of those three things. Now, in this problem, and that's where these problems work. In this problem, let's take a look at what we've got here. In this problem, Kimco built a chemical processing plant in a rural area. Now, they built it in a rural area, and I'm sort of pressed the time here, and you know what that's going to mean. That is, there was nobody there when they built the plant. And these people who were going to claim harm later on came to the nuisance. But you and I know that coming to the nuisance is not a defense. Okay. It may become a small factor, but it's not a defense. So Kimco built a chemical processing plant in a rural area. As part of its operation, Kimco discharges waste into a local river at levels that are low but constant. Aha. So they are contaminating the water at a low level, but they're still contaminating it constantly. Continuing. Kimco carefully monitors discharge levels on a regular basis. Okay, so they're measuring the discharge levels, how much they're putting into the water, but I'm worried about that because they need to somehow or other, I mean, we all know the problem already, somehow or other, the mere fact that they're keeping track of how much of this poison they're putting into the water, very carefully keeping track of it, that may not be enough. The level at which they are keeping track may be too high. In fact, we know it's too high. It's killing Paul's cattle, Pat's cattle. And so although they're monitoring how much they're putting in there consistently and keeping it at the level, not letting it go any higher, the level is set too high because it's killing his cattle. And so monitoring a bad standard carefully is still wrong in some kind of way. It may be an ultra-hazardous activity. After all, these are poisons they're putting into the water. It may be negligence because they didn't set the standard where it should have been. It may be intentional. It is intentional if you have told them, look, you are causing me this harm. Your whistle at night, at midnight, keeps me awake. And after I tell the factory that, they just keep on blowing the whistle every night at midnight. Then it's intentional. Now, I may not get punitive damages for that because maybe they haven't found a better way to get their workers to come to work or something, and maybe they're not acting maliciously. But it is intentional if they know it and keep doing it. So here, once Pat tells this chemical factory, you're killing my cattle, if they keep on doing it, that's intentional, even though it may not be malicious. So once Pat has located Kimco as the people who are poisoning the water, he now has to prove that they poisoned the water intentionally or negligently, or that this is an ultra-hazardous activity and they're liable on that ground. So let's keep going. Next paragraph. About 6 months after Kimco began operations, Pat, a rancher, purchased a tract of grazing land traversed by the same river approximately a half-mile downstream of Kimco's location, and stocked the tract with several thousand head of cattle. So we know what's going to happen. The cow is going to get poisoned. Within several, by the way, don't forget, Kimco is going to say Pat came to the nuisance, but we know the answer to that. Within several months, some of Pat's cattle began to get sick, and several died. Pat initially attributed the loss of his cattle to a variety of causes, including a recent change he had made in their feed. That makes sense. That's what he would think at first. After another year following the onset of sickness among his cattle, with continuing loss of animals, Pat decided to test the water in the river. Okay, well, I don't think Pat has his guilt of latches here. It takes a while to track down what the problem was. I think Pat has acted reasonably. Continuing, Pat decided to test the water. He discovered that the level of toxic substances in the local river is sufficient to cause sickness and death to his animals. Aha! He's finally found the cause. So he now knows who's doing it. He's still going to have to show they did it intentionally, negligently, or strict liability. Continue. During the preceding year, Pat's cattle loss totaled about $100,000. Aha. Well, $100,000 cattle loss, when he sues them for the harm they've already caused, he's going to want that $100,000. But be sure that you make note that that $100,000 has nothing, that doesn't buy Kimco the right to keep doing this in the future. That's just paying for the harm they did in the past. Keep going. Pat's cattle loss total about $100,000, and he projects that his losses will increase every year unless Kimco stops discharging waste in the river. So it's $100,000 a year and getting worse every year. And that's Pat's situation. So you know what Pat wants. He wants them to stop contaminating the river. So he's bound to sue them and try to get an injunction to stop them from contaminating the river. Whether or not you give them the injunction, well, he's going to go there and say, you're committing the tort of nuisance. And then you've interfered, Pat's going to say, your waste coming down the river has interfered with the quiet use and enjoyment of the land of another. It's a non-trespassory invasion because the water, the molecules in the river won't be treated as trespass. These so-called atomic trespassers are not treated, they're treated as a nuisance. And so he'll say, contaminating the water in the river is a non-trespassory interference with the use and enjoyment of my land. And so there's your nuisance. And he's going to say, I know who's doing it. Kimco is doing it. What remedies am I going to get? I want damages. I want damages for what they've done already. Go through actual, causal, foreseeable, unavoidable. Pat will say, I want punitive damages for what they did. Probably won't get it because they didn't know either. Pat wants restitution. Well, the Kimco doesn't have anything that belongs to Pat, isn't getting any special benefit out of what it's doing wrong, so none of this is going to work, no restitution against Kimco, but he wants an injunction against Kimco. You don't need a TRO because there's nothing urgent about this. It's been going on for a year. Pat doesn't need a TRO, doesn't need a preliminary injunction. He'll go right to the injunction. At the injunction hearing, should Pat prevail or not, Pat will say, the remedy at law is inadequate because the money won't do. I want to use my land. The land's unique. I can't use it. Remedy at law is inadequate. Property right. Pat certainly has a property right involved, although it doesn't need it. Feasible to enforce. Is it feasible for the court to enforce the injunction against the Kimco? And yeah, they can tell Kimco to just shut it down. But when you get to balancing the equities, given that there are a lot of people working there and so forth, the court might not be willing to do that. But and then the equitable defenses, latches, unclean hands, we don't have any of that. So continuing to read the problem, then you see how the solution is going to go. It says here in the third paragraph, Kimco employs more than 1,000 persons in the rural community, and that's why when you balance the equities here, it's going to be a problem. It is by far the largest employer. As a result of Pat's complaint, Kimco hired an engineering firm to investigate the waste being emanated at its plant and learned that installation of a new filtration system could substantially reduce, if not eliminate, the emissions. Well, that's great. Tell them to do it. That way Pat will be happy. But the problem they go on to say is the filtration system would cost almost $1 million, a sum that Kimco could pay only if it were financed over a 10-year term. Well, so let them finance it over a 10-year term. And they've got to stop interfering with Paul's land, Pat's land. The relocation of the plant The relocation of the plant would cost many millions of dollars, so the court's not going to do that, and would cause Kimco to cease operations. Equities, no, they're not going to do that. Hauling, storing, and distributing water for cattle from alternative sources would cost $100,000 a year. So if you get an injunction asking Kimco to haul water to Pat for $100,000 a year, Pat doesn't want that. Pat doesn't want to be involved with Kimco forever in the future. Every time he needs water, he's got to wait for their trucks to bring the water down here. Pat doesn't want to run his cattle ranch that way. So that's not an acceptable injunction. But they could do that for $100,000 a year. But if they finance this purchase of the filtering system, they could do that over 10 years at $100,000 a year. Let's keep reading. Pat sued Kimco requesting an injunction, either to enjoin all operations of Kimco. Well, the court's not going to do that because when you get to here, the B for balancing the equities, the answer is going to be no. Or require that Kimco cease or remedy the discharge. Well, if they do that, they'll close the plant. Or require Kimco to furnish Pat with clean water from the alternative source. Well, of these three, the one the court's likely to do is to tell Kimco to buy the filtration system, put it in there. The others are not practical. Continuing. Pat also claims that he should be awarded substantial damages to compensate him for his past losses, that's true, and prospective losses. So watch it, if they pay Pat for his losses in the future, they're buying the right to continue to do this in the future. So Pat shouldn't want money for the future. He wants money for the past and injunction for the future. Kimco opposed the prayer for an injunction on the ground that its operation in the area preceded Pat's activities. That doesn't work. And asserted that either junction requiring any of the remedies sought by Pat or an award for damages sought would put Kimco out of business. And what arguments would you make regarding each of the junctions? You would argue, of course, that the court should simply require Kimco to install the filtering system. They said they can do that. They can do that for $100,000 a year because if they spread the $1 million cost over 10 years, that's $1 million a year. It's $100,000 a year. The fact that it costs them $100,000 a year to deliver the water, and the other option is just close the plant completely. So you explain that's the one that the way you explain the choice that happens, you go down this checklist, and it's at the balancing of the equities where things are different. Okay. So we see how it's done. You see that this is the way to do it. Use the structure, get maximum points. That's the end of this lecture.